All right, so welcome back to the Weekend Express. Time now for our newspaper review segment. Remember to interact with us and engage with us on Twitter at KTN News. You can also tweet me directly at Michele Ngele or use the hashtag Weekend Express KTN. Talk to us about what's on the papers this morning. And in studio, we have a political analyst Dismas Mukua and High Court Advocate Ndegwa Njiru. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us in studio this morning.
Thank you
very
much.
All right, so we begin with the Standard this morning, and on the front page, the arrest shocker for 16 NYS suspects. So this was breaking news yesterday morning when the 16 top devolution ministry officials, some of them former, some of them current, were arrested by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, which has been under intense pressure to demonstrate that its investigators are actually working. Dismiss. Is this a step in the right direction?
Well, number one, I think the headline is misleading because you've known that resources have been stolen. So we're actually expecting to have these guys arrested. And I don't think this is a step in the right direction because there's a lot of evidence, even if you haven't gone to a school of law like Mr. Ndegwa here, to actually confirm that resources have been stolen. So why the Anti-Corruption Commission and the DPP are dragging their feet to prosecute these guys, one fails to under. And the commission himself yesterday confirmed that there are 14 suspect contracts being investigated and that they've already sorted one, which that one seems to be a very good idea. But one would expect that in this kind of prosecutions, when it's very clear even to a layman that state resources have been stolen, when none other than the deputy president himself has confirmed that resources have been stolen from NYS, one wonders why the agencies are taking a lot of time. And the curious thing is that the two big fish, according to the Anti-Corruption Commission, are missing in action, that it has taken them to be given those warrants of arrest for them to be presented before the court of law. Again, one wonders, how did they get access to this information that they were going to be arrested, and then they did a runner?
Because I understand that the others, the rest of the 16 were not aware that, according to this article at least, were not aware that they would be arrested. So the fact that these two had a word of it and actually, had time to escape that.
To do a runner. Because according to reliable resources, all of them were requested to present themselves to the Anti-Corruption Commission in the morning, as if it was going to be normal investigations. But those two, maybe because of their position in society, had access to information that they were going to be nabbed. But when you look at it in the larger context, it's baffling that right now, the Jubilee government at the national level is very happy. They've broken into a dance and song that there are allegations of corruption in Kilifi. You've seen Jubilee members of the National Assembly doing a media conference and throwing stones at Raila Odinga, saying, Mr. Raila Odinga, stop talking about corruption because there is corruption at Kilifi. So it's as if that the only reason why Raila has been complaining about corruption, it was happening at the national level. Now court counties have been affected, and Jubilee and or rather Duale, speaking on behalf of the majority leadership in the National Assembly, is saying, wait a minute, there's corruption in Kilifi, so you have no moral authority. And one is leading to one conclusion, that Jubilee right now is not interested in fighting corruption. They're interested in fighting CORD, they're interested in fighting Raila Odinga, and they're interested in fighting anybody who raises the issue of corruption. So that leaves many people to wonder, is there a secret pact between the leadership, the national government, and the 47 counties that let's rob Jiku, let's rob them of all the resources they have, and if we get nabbed in the process, we do a small circus and then we let it die. Because right now, there are so many court governors who would be reluctant to get into this fight of corruption. And the same will be the case in Jubilee. Because now it seems from the Auditor's General reports that everybody is guilty. And if you make noise, you're complaining, you're fighting corruption, somebody will go to your county, will unearth some piece of evidence, and then you're going to be silenced. A very bad state of affairs where we find ourselves in. Instead of the national agencies really fighting corruption, they're now trying to get into some circus. It's like a game of musical chairs. And at the end of the day, when Jiku is bleeding to death.
All right, Ndegwa, I don't know if you agree with Dismas. I mean, many have termed this a PR stunt by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. But do you think Kenyans are likely to get answers from this, at least over the NYS saga?
Thank you. I think I differ slightly with him. First of all, the title of the paper is correct, that it's a shocker to the Kenyans. that they can even move and make arrests arising from the NYS saga. But on a quick look and analysis of the photo appearing on the first page of the paper, you can see these guys, they are being driven in a van.
Right.
I was there and I saw them. But a thief who has stolen mahindi or kuku is driven in those trucks. The other thing is, you can see a gentleman who is there. He's an accused person, but he's busy taking selfie, trying to show that this is a good thing for us.
All right, let's have that picture up on the screen at the front page of the Standard, so that people can understand what we're talking about.
Yes, we have canonized corruption, such that such kind of a person does not even feel ashamed.
Right.
That he's actually going to be charged with that particular
offense. And you're right, Ndego. Actually, one of the officials is taking a selfie.
He's taking a selfie
in the van.
So to him, he's a glorified thief. And nobody, and to be where he is glory and honor. Because this country is a country that has refused to inculcate good values, ethics, and ethos in our society.
Right.
I was analyzing issues in Botswana, and I was trying to get the reason why Botswana is where it is today. And I realized that they came up with 3 major principles. First of all, when Botswana was where we are today, they formed a commission of inquiry to inquire into the reason why there is massive growth of corruption in their country. That commission came up with 3 findings. One of the findings was that the administration of the day was not firm enough to fight corruption. They also realized that the judicial system and the arresting and the law enforcement system was also not strict enough in fighting corruption. And they also realized that they had a problem in their moral values. So they came up with 3 suggestions. One, that they must strengthen political goodwill to ensure that there is no sacred cow who goes unpunished. They also ensured that they are going to strengthen the investigation and the prosecution procedures in their country, such that today, Botswana, any person who is arrested of corruption, we always have 84% convictions coming from our courts. But today, in comparison with Kenya, we have not had any successful conviction. We started with Golden Bag, we came to Aglo Racing, we came to Triton. We cannot even name them, we have lost track. But all those ones are now glorified individuals. If there is any need to review the Electoral Commission or the IBC, they will be the person chairing. If there is reason to come up with any committee in Parliament, they will be the persons to chair those committees. If it is NYS, and if somebody has been mentioned, that particular person will be the very best person to come and start protecting the system on that particular day. So in Botswana, the other thing that they did is they came up with what is called public education.
Right.
They started educating the members of the public, and it became a debate in Botswana, such that this debate is even taught in our classes or in their classes in school, such that a child coming from class 1, instead of getting laptop, he or she knows the consequences of the corruption, of having the vices of corruption in the society. But for us here, we glorify these issues of corruption. Today, if you go and audit the tender or the procurement of the laptop procedures or the process, is this a laptop or an iPad? I don't know. You realize that it is not every single coin that went to where it was meant to be. So at the end of the day, we have inculcated the values in our children that you can only succeed in life when you steal and when you lie, as opposed to what is happening in our contemporary countries like Botswana. So to me, we are yet to see what becomes or what comes out of the NYS saga. But there is absolutely not goodwill. Look at what the deputy president is doing. Farouk Kibet is mentioned. Murkomen is mentioned. Duale is mentioned in that saga. But what we see is that instead of the deputy president dealing with you, Farouk, what did you do? You, Murkomen, what did you do? He is busy telling Raila, ata kwako, even your house is burning.
Right.
Go and put out fire in your house. He is busy telling us, the person who is telling us that Farouk was involved is doing catwalking and a lot of English. So we is having no goodwill at all. And that is why we are saying that the debate on corruption must now be owned by the Kenyans themselves.
Right.
Because the politicians are always having accusations, counter-accusations. No, neither CORD nor Jubilee will help us fight corruption. The Kenyans must realize and have their self-introspection every now and then that when this massive corruption is happening, it is not the political class that is going to solve their problems. We must start having this, what is called national dialogue, that is not guided by the politicians, that is not guided by the Jubilee or the CORD. Because what happens here is that any time we have such kind of debate, it takes political inclinations. If I am from Jubilee region, I'll not want to hear anybody speak bad things about Jubilee. I'll see no evil, I'll hear no evil, I'll speak no evil about my government. Because if that would happen, the question would be whether Duale had the moral authority to come and castigate and tell us that Raila has been having air tickets from Mombasa, he has been paid hotels. If he is candid enough in trying to help us fight this corruption, the first thing he would have done is to buy the first page of the Standard and do us all those WhatsApp that he has or anything that he has to show us that this is what is exactly happening. But now they have tilted this debate into propaganda. We are actually now at the verge of losing the debate on corruption. And I'm very, very much afraid. Yes.
And talking of keeping things in perspective and putting corruption in the hands of the Kenyan, let's take a look at page 4 of the paper, the 2017-2018 budget proposal. So Treasury is unveiling a cautious 2.3 trillion expenditure for the 2017-2018 financial year. This, of course, is slightly higher than the current 2.04 trillion that we have for this year, ending June 30th, 2017. But what's interesting from this proposed plan is that they're allocating an extra 32.7 billion shillings to the county governments. This despite an audit report showing the amount of corruption in the county governments after devolution. And of course, an issue for Kenyans. Money has been stolen. You haven't accounted for that money. And here you are adding an extra 32.7 billion shillings. Dismiss. I mean, is this going to probably spew corruption even higher?
There are two ways to look at it. Number one, there's corruption at a national level. That's under Jubilee. Then there's corruption across the 47 counties, both Jubilee and CORD. And the fact that we are losing resources, both at a national level and at a county level, does not therefore mean that we stop giving these counties resources. That way, then, if we follow that logic, then we'll be at a standstill. Right. And the country will come to a stop. Instead, what we are supposed to be doing, and Ndegwa has indicated, is just to get the goodwill to fight corruption in Kenya. Because there are a number of counties that are doing so many good programs and have not been victims of corruption. And a good county which comes to mind, although you cannot give them a clean statement, but a lot of great stuff has been done in Wajir. There's some very good projects which are ongoing. So instead of us being worried on how we are going to spend these resources at a national level and a county level, the most important thing is to ensure that the governance and accountability systems work. That if you're running, say, the Kisii County or Wajir County, the governor has got the principal responsibility of ensuring that it's got systems and procedures in place which will not allow for anybody to steal any coin. And President Kenyatta at a national level is got that principal responsibility of ensuring that nobody steals a coin. That would be the first level in fighting corruption. Because right now it seems to be the case that if you have 10 civil servants or 10 parastatal, people working in a parastatal, 10 people seated in a room, they can easily connive to bastardize the system and steal resources. So maybe what we need to do is to get experts from the private sector, maybe PwC, Deloitte, to come up with systems which are almost bulletproof, that you cannot break into. And if you break into those systems, then there must be consequences.
But that's what they said about the IFMI system, that it's, you cannot break into the IFMI system. You've seen what happens.
No, but you see, a system is as good as the human beings who are running it. Because normally these systems are supposed to have several controls. That it requires multiple entries, maybe 10 persons to look at an issue before, so that if you're having 10 persons looking at an issue, then the probability of stealing public resources is very low. But now you have the 10 people seated under a mango tree and conniving on how they're going to steal resources. I actually understand the reason as to why we are able to trace that our resources have been stolen is because of the very if-miss. That as soon as you enter data or you got a password, you cannot corrupt the system, you cannot delete anything, everything is bulletproof. But Michelle, at the end of the day, really, we'll talk till the cows come home if we do not see consequences for this. Like, for instance, you said when you look at that page 1, how on earth can a suspect, somebody who has stolen Wanjiko's resources, be taken to a court of law in an air-conditioned van, and they're taking selfies? There's only one lady there who seems to be ashamed and has covered her face. But you see, right now in Kenya, what we do, we glorify thieves. It's as if we celebrate clever thieves. But until such a time that we can penalize people who are stealing public resources, then nothing will ever, ever, ever work. Because what would happen today when you steal public resources? You become a village celebrity, you are invited to all Harambes, and before you know, you become a member of the National Assembly, or you've gone to the Senate, or indeed you've become a governor. You recall the words of Chief Justice Mutunga, retired, that if we only implemented Chapter 6, 90% of the people holding public places are not going to be in office because all of them are stolen.
Right.
And that's one of the challenges I understand facing the IBC recruitment. That they're trying to get commissioners, but when they go through the reports from the Anti-Corruption Commission and from other agencies, they find so many stains. They're unable to get somebody. And I think it's important for President Kenyatta to demonstrate his goodwill and to ask his Jubilee counterparts to stop attacking people who come up with information around corruption. Because attacking Raila Odinga that is defending corrupt governors is a logic upside down, because does Raila control the Anti-Corruption Commission? No. Does Raila control the DPP? No. So how would Raila be protecting these guys if they've stolen resources? It's up to the anti-corruption authorities or the DPP or the CID, if they've got evidence that any governor from the code area has stolen resources, why can they arraign those guys in courts? I mean, it's unbelievable. You cannot even begin to imagine that if Governor Kingi has been accused of corruption and he's been taken to a court of law, that Raila Odinga will go and stop the proceedings from taking place. And I think instead of Duale taking us around small circles and emphatically saying that Raila should condemn corruption, he should ensure he's the majority leader. And in the hierarchy of things, he's actually number 3. He should just ensure that if there's evidence that Governor Kingi has been giving Raila Odinga money meant for Kilifi taxpayers, if Governor Kingi has been paying bills for Raila Odinga, why can't he bring that evidence in a court of law? And then we have Governor Kingi, prosecuted, and if he's found guilty, he's jailed.
Right.
Because right now what they're doing is, Raila talks about corruption, and you notice, for the longest time, Jubilee has been pushed into a very tight corner. They had no voice to discuss corruption. And as soon as there's a dot coming up in Kilifi, now all over media conferences and everything, and instead of attacking corruption, they're attacking Raila Odinga. And it's incumbent on President Kenyatta not to lose his cool when he's addressing public fora. Like I saw yesterday at Kasarani, he lost his cool. And he should know that the principal duty of Raila Odinga is not to give him a red rose every day in the morning.
Right.
Is to attack him on corruption. And when the opposition guys attack you on corruption, that's part of the job description. It's the responsibility to make life for you a nightmare so that they kick you out of office. And for this particular case, the attacks coming from Salim Davadi, from Raila, from Kalonzo, from Wetangula, they're not shouting fire in a hole. There's actually a fire. There's evidence that resources have been stolen. So the president and his deputy cannot just claim to behave like saints, that they've not seen corruption in Kenya, and they start accusing anybody, raising the red alert.
Right. All right, Ndegwa,
yes.
Talk to us about your thoughts on this proposed budget for the 2017-2018 year, considering that we're heading into a very tough election year.
Thank you. To me, I think I pity Kenyans, because every day or every time the government wants to spend, they are very quick to tell us on how they're going to spend and to give us an expenditure plan.
Right.
But they never tell us how they spend the previous monies that they told us they're going to spend.
Right.
So we are always prepared in advance to anticipate a very hefty and colossal expenditures from government, but they never give us an audit of how they spent our previous monies. So to me, what I'm then saying is government must open itself to public scrutiny. The government, again, must also be willing to implement the constitution of the day, because it has given very sound principles under Article 10 of public scrutiny. It has spoken about transparency, it has spoken about accountability, it has spoken about inclusivity and people's participation. So, as it happened in Botswana, where government realized that they must be able to open themselves to public scrutiny, the government of the day, be it the county government or the national government, must be able to open itself to public scrutiny, must also be able to give the public a platform in which they can be able to scrutinize such kind of budgets. I have noticed with keen interest, even from our county governments, that the only time the people get to interact with such kind of budgets is what is choreographed as public participation.
Right, yes. And just before you continue, because the Treasury is saying that this draft budget policy is being subjected to scrutiny by the public, after which they will take feedback and include that feedback in the statement before presenting it to Cabinet.
Yes.
So does this happen? Does this citizen feedback really reflect?
To the best of my knowledge and to the best of my experience, for the last 5 or 6 years we've been having the new constitution. And I believe I am one of the right-thinking members of the societies, and this must is too. And I also believe that the persons listening to this program this morning are right-thinking members of the society. If today we are asked to cast a vote on whether or not we have either participated in the county government's budget formulation or the national government's budget formulation, none of us will cast a positive vote.
Right.
This this thing called public participation is a platform to conceal information from Kenyans. Because how do you move or do you operationalize a very, very elaborate program of public participation without having proper acts of parliament?
Right.
How do you define public participation where there are no manuals or even a guiding policy to show how these feedback mechanisms will be done?
Right.
What they do, and this also happens in Kirinyaga where I come from, they take money, they advertise on the radios or on newspapers that we shall be having public participation on this day. But on that day, it's only 10 people who turn up because none of us understands what public participation is all about. Never mention that one of the functions of the county government under the County Government Act is to operationalize civic education. It is from civic education that people will learn the input and the impact of public participation. But they have never done it. Why? Because they do not want to enlighten Wanjiku.
Right.
Because once you enlighten Wanjiku will start scrutinizing you and questioning you. And this has almost become the altar of corruption. That you do not approach the holy altar. This is for the preserved few. And Wanjiku should not be enlightened so that he can be able to scrutinize. So to me, what the minister is doing here is only preparing another platform to steal Kenyans' money. Because when you write on papers like this, and you tell me that it's an expenditure plan, how do I scrutinize? When you talk about something like the foreign reserve stood at this, how many people understand what foreign reserve is? So this is just a sugar-coating way of trying to create another room to steal public money. For instance, we are being told that next year, we are going to spend 176 billion on infrastructure. This year, how much have we spent? How much have we spent?
We don't know.
We do not know. So to me, they must be guarded enough, and government must learn that this is not their money, it's our money.
Right.
They must be able to administrate public resources, and it must be able to benefit the beneficiaries. Government is just a trustee. There is no way a trustee can deal with the properties of a beneficiary as though those properties are his. Yes.
All right.
Now, Michelle, there's something about public participation.
Right.
And in as much as the government is actually guilty, the national government and county governments, some citizens are actually guilty. They don't pay particular attention to what is supposed to happen. And I've been in that category for a long time, till once I decided that I'm going to KICC for one of these public participations. And at that stage, you realize that there's a lot of drama, because the Treasury has unpicked a number of people who are part of the crowd who are going to be supporting what they're discussing. One would expect, in as much as we don't have legislation to guide on public participation, that the National Treasury or the county governments will actually run adverts in the newspapers or on media or maybe TV and radio on how they intend to use the resources over a duration of time, so that people can understand and socialize with those people. Instead of having those interesting State House summits, the Minister of Agriculture needs to go to our agricultural base, maybe Kitale, and say, these are the projects we intend to do next year. Are they going to benefit the community? If you want to talk about tourism, go to Mombasa, meet with the stakeholders, say, this is the amount of money we are looking for, and this is how we intend to spend it. How is it going to benefit us? But for you to call for a meeting at KCC, you place a very small ad in the newspapers, and you invite guys to come to KCC. Maybe 20 guys come up, they're given a cup of tea, and out of those 20 guys who come, all of them have had meetings before the main meeting.
Right.
So everything they're doing really is just drama. And a second level that we may need to look at as a National Treasury, and they were spoken about this, when you are coming up with the budgets we have in Kenya are incremental budgets. That last year we allocated, say, 1 billion to infrastructure. Next year, let's add another 500 million, or let's add something else. And nobody goes the extra mile to say, the resources we gave you last year, how did you use the resources? Was there a good return on investment? And economies that have made very good progress, they have a zero-based budgeting. That the principles in every ministry, you do not just say that since last year we had 1 billion, give us times 5 of what we had last year. No, you have to justify every project. You scrutinize every project, and you get stakeholders telling you this is what we need to do. Like, for instance, the infrastructure projects we are having, who tells Jubilee that this is actually priority? Because you're putting up some, like for instance, they're doing a railway line from Mombasa all the way to Hinterland, and then you would imagine that one is going to assist us in transporting cargo. But in the same breath, you are told that, again, we want to create a highway from Mombasa. We want to do a 6-lane highway. So you begin to wonder. Initially, you told us you wanted to do the SGR so that we can use it for cargo. The project is not complete. Then again, on the same vein, you're telling us you want to extend the roads. You want to create a highway, a 6-lane. For what purpose? I think as a nation, we need to go to that zero-based budgeting so that public servants can start working. They need to sit down, do investment analysis, do very serious analysis, so that you do not just give money to a project. You give money to a project if it makes sense to society. And I know in so many people, in so many areas, like in agricultural active areas, maybe what the people need there are roads. They do not need a railway line. They need a road so that they can transport their milk from point A to point B. And you recall a few days ago, they said Kenya was facing a drought situation.
Right.
There was famine. But it's not as if that we do not have food in Kenya. There's a lot of food rotting in Kitale.
Farmers complaining.
Yeah, farmers complaining. But the reason why they cannot sell their food, number one, is there are no roads. And there are parts of Kisii where there's a lot of milk, but farmers are unable to access the markets. Now, if you had very solid public participation and the governor has got a conversation with the farmers, then the farmers would tell him, for us, our priority here is a road. You're telling us that you want to give us, say, ablution facilities and stuff like that. For us, our priority here is a road. But because of our governors are very lazy, the national government is lazy, they just look at the budget on Excel sheets and do a factor maybe times 4 what they had last year, and then they celebrate a new beginning. They say, we have made progress, which really doesn't make progress at all. We can never, ever, because, you know, these resources are very scarce. So it's not up to a few bureaucrats seated at Treasury to say, we are going to invest money in, say, maternal health care. And in some parts of the world, you've got very solid midwives, and they'll tell you, our midwives here know how to assist women deliver. So for us, our priority is not even maternal health care. Our priority maybe is a road or water harvesting technologies.
And so, of course, you know, with the run-up to the 2017 elections, hopefully Kenyans can be more active. This is a proposed expenditure plan, so maybe we still have time, you know, to take part in the, you know, citizen public participation.
Wait a minute, Michelle. If anybody, say from CORD, tries to give a view on what Rotich has presented, the next thing Dwali will say, you're introducing politics into this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've also noticed something very keenly, Michelle, that whenever you see government allocating large sums of money into a particular vote head, you must start raising eyebrows. For instance, look at what happened in NYS. NYS is a very, very old government unit in this country. But none of us ever knew what NYS was all about.
Right.
We knew hawa ni watu wa kubeba shovels. These are guys just, you go there, you get prepared as a mechanic, you leave. But when they realized that this is a unit in where it's a conduit they can steal money from, they allocate large sums of money there. Because for me, when I am in Kirinyaga, I'll just be thinking when my son joins NYS, he's going to be trained as a technical person. He's going to be trained, probably he's going to also to get an opportunity to join the military or the police force, having come from the NYS. But I'll never think that money will ever be allocated to this particular unit. And so nobody will ever be careful or keen to know how the money is spent. So in that particular time when you're in your slumber, money is used and conduits are taken away.
Right.
So Kenyans must be on watch. And we must invite this debate. And what I have seen somebody calling the People's Summit to start debating this matter. And realize that whenever you see government allocating a large, colossal amount of money in a particular voted, wewe ujue hapo kuna wizi unapangwa.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So we need to look at the plans, the ones that have received more expenditure this year, and figure out what it is they do exactly.
And Michelle, the president himself at some stage indicated that most of the government's projects are vendor-driven. So it's a few rich guys who see it, and the people are supposed to provide healthcare in Kenya. The county governments had not requested for the mobile clinics. And healthcare is supposed to be a devolution affair. So why would the national government want to procure mobile clinics? And the national government, as far as healthcare is concerned, is just supposed to come up with policies, nothing outside the policies. Now that's what you're talking about, vendor-driven.
Right. Ndegwa, let's hear your final word on this before we move on to another topic.
Yes, that's a very interesting thing that happened yesterday. And to me, I believe the person who was responsible for that advertisement was trying to raise Kenyans' consciousness in what is happening.
Right.
He may not have actually believed and intended to invite people to that particular cartel, but he was trying to raise the debate so that Wanjiko can own the debate like we have now owned it.
Right.
We have owned this debate to an extent that now it's a factor in each and every person who has a smart mobile phone. When I wake up and see that snapshot in my phone, and I realize, oh my, this is how far we have gone. I must start thinking in my own way of how to deal with these issues. Do I want to join this cartel, or do I want to fight this cartel? That person who did it is a blessing in disguise because it has given us the debate.
Right.
And it has started sparking and inviting Kenyans to interrogate and internalize themselves. Just what Dismas is saying is that analyzing again the mobile clinics, I again come and sum up and say that the mobile clinics, despite the fact that that function is owned by the county governments, the national government felt that they have lost a very important unit of how they can steal public funds. And so they must come up with a plan. That is, never mind that it is not even in their own docket. So that person who came up with that proposal that the national government needs to procure for and on behalf of the county governments must take personal responsibility. The unfortunate thing is we are having a presidency that has said, I am no longer able to fight corruption. Munataka nifanye nini?
Right.
So the thieves have now known that the watchman is no longer there. I can steal. You see, if you have a naughty child in your house, and you always used to lock your cupboards and your units that she may not or he may not eat sugar, and one day he realizes mom has not carried away the keys, the next thing he's going to do is to steal that sugar and eat it. So the cartels have now known that the president has thrown away the towel. He's no longer interested in fighting corruption. He has feigned weakness that is no longer able to fight it. So they are going to steal.
They're going to steal.
Right and center.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, and speaking of that, and of course the blaming and pointing fingers, I mean, corruption is all there is on the newspapers this morning. And on page 6 of The Nation, Raila tells Uhuru, do not blame me for your failures. But this was something that Raila said in Kakamega. And but before that, there was a very interesting incident that happened. And I'd like us to maybe, Director, if we can get a video of the Oparanya being shoved by Mumias East Member of Parliament Ben Washiali. So this happened yesterday, when they were clashing over Mumias. Remember, 7 guns were stolen from a police station in Mumias. And so the GSU have been on the rampage. There's been a lot of allegations of rape and killings because of the same. But Dismas, what are your thoughts on the shoving? Because it went viral as well, the video of Washiali shoving Oparanya. This kind of display by leaders has been condemned for such a long time, but it still continues to happen. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, maybe we begin by the fact that a number of guns were stolen. And I think really that's a systematic failure again in the police system. There's no way you're going to have one policeman, and I don't know whether or not he had a weapon. Because, there's so many issues, there's so many variables that one is unable to understand. That you've got an armory, and you are seated there, one gentleman all alone, and probably without a weapon. So understand from the basic standing orders within the police service, that is wrong. Number 2, one is unable to understand how somebody with a panga can actually come and disable a policeman. So I'm hoping, one wonders whether or not this policeman was actually armed. Because if you are armed and there are some guys who are coming here with pangas, you can actually afford to kill a number of them. And now the police stand accused that in the process of looking for those guns, they're really committing human rights atrocities.
Right.
Because there's a lady who had come from hospital who had a wound, and the policemen wanted to establish whether or not she had actually kept a rifle in her private parts. So you begin to wonder, how can a rational human being start looking for a rifle in the private parts? I mean, what is the size of this rifle and how can it fit in a lady's private parts? And they banned some property. There's a gentleman who suffered, I think, 80% ban.
He actually died.
He's already dead.
10, yeah.
And in as much as a crime has been committed, you cannot punish the entire community. You're burning houses, you're looking for money. And those people are very poor. Because I saw a gentleman who was being interviewed yesterday. He said the policeman disappeared with all my money. And then on further interrogation, he said it was 200 bob. So you can imagine this gentleman has been keeping 200 bob under the mattress, and the cops have disappeared with this. Now, it's under that environment that Raila Odinga and Oparanya went to, to associate with those victims and, try to console them and tell them this is really unacceptable. And then you find this Jubilee-leaning MP, Washiali, because he says, as far as he's concerned, Raila Odinga and Oparanya were going to get political capital. And you can take this to the bank, that Raila Odinga and Oparanya actually are not bothered that people are getting a beating in Mumias.
Right.
They're not bothered at all. What they wanted to do was to associate with them so that they get political capital. But even the reasons notwithstanding, it's unacceptable for elected leaders to display such kind of arrogance.
Right. I don't know if the director can give us, just a preview of what happened with the Washiali and Oparanya. But Ndagwa, let's hear your thoughts on what happened as well.
To me, I think I really identify myself with the miseries Wanjiku is suffering there at, is it Kakamega? Mumias. And it has 2 or 3 things that I would want to comment about. That even the so-called police reforms did not yield the intended results. Because if you look at the Constitution, it's very clear that police authority is subject to the civilian authority. So that person whom you are raping, that person whom you are torturing and tormenting in search of a gun is actually your boss.
Right.
And you are subordinate to the civilian authority. But because Kenyans do not know this, government has refused to initiate public awareness and civic education so that the members of the Wanjikos can know that police authority is subject to the civilian authority. We'll always see what is happening in Mumias.
Right.
And today is Mumias, tomorrow is another place. The other thing that we learn from what happened in Mumias is the inability of the system to check itself. The system that we are using today does not audit itself, and does not do what is called accounting to itself. If the system learns, if the system accounts to itself, then they would have been able to learn with what happened in Kapenguria.
Right.
Again, a police post was attacked. And the next thing we saw is that, oh, we are going to have all the police posts, all the police stations fenced and put with a gate and all that. Where was the gate?
When this happened.
When this happened.
Right.
Yet we were told it's going to happen. Where was there a person manning that particular gate? Okay. What happened to the money that was allocated to fence and to gate these police?
Because you can be sure money was allocated.
Yes, to fence these police stations. The other thing is, we have a culture of not wanting to take responsibility. If it was in a developed nations and civilized community, somebody would have already taken responsibility. Either somebody would have resigned, would have said, I have failed the Kenyans, I am not up to the game or to the work that I was mandated to do. I am not able to give security to the Kenyans.
Right.
So I have resigned. Remember, one of the functions of the national government is to give security to Wanjiku. And if they are not able to, and the question is then, if they're not able to protect where security is supposed to come from, what is the fate of Wanjiku?
Right.
And then these are the debates that we must take. May I give an example of what happened this week when there was a scuffle between the nominated member and the elected member from Laikipia, Laikipia County. What happened is we had the well-abled and endowed General Kaiseri saying, I have banned you from coming to my office.
Right.
He banned that particular member of parliament from going to his office.
From a public office.
Never mind. I think the public offices have now been owned by individuals. That in Kaiseri, in the 21st century, in where we are celebrating the ownership of the new constitution, can utter such kind of words. Very irresponsible and reckless words coming from a state officer. And chapter 6 is very clear. And also the Integrity Act is also very clear. That a public officer must own up to his words. If you are speaking, you must be able to speak for and on behalf of the Kenyans, and you must be able to present the correct positions, or, as it is and ought to be in law. Now, when Kaiseri comes and says, I've banned you, and he keeps quiet when women are being raped in Mumias, he's having a double speak.
Right.
And he needs to give us a break for all purposes and intent. Kenyans cannot be taken to a ride and all this hogwash coming from the state officers.
And of course, what's important, again, these are human rights violations being committed in Mumias. I don't know why nobody is taking the GSU officers into account, because they are committing rape, they are committing murder, somebody has died, destruction of property. Where does the buck stop for the GSU officers?
May I just finish before this must takes over? That a nation is as good as its citizens. Michelle, if you are not a responsible parent, it's unlikely that you'll be able to if you're not responsible yourself, it's most unlikely that you're going to bring up a responsible child.
Right.
So if Kenyans themselves are not going to hold leaders to their account, we'll always have these kind of abuses. Look at it. Where do we get our police officers? Don't we get them from the same society? Are they not the members of the same society? Like, for instance, the class 1 child who was promised a laptop when Jubilee came into power will one day grow to become a police officer, a minister from that particular class, a president from that particular class, a governor from that particular class. But when we introduced him to these matters, what did we tell him first? We told him that you can only become a president by lying to me that you're going to give me a laptop. So we have inculcated that culture and that very bad virtue in our kids.
Right.
That kid is the one who is also going to grow and to become a policeman. When he becomes a policeman, he'll be having this flagrant breach of the law, very much unconcerned and unmindful of what happens. Yes.
Michelle, in Kenya, there's no consequence for breaking the law. if you have stolen resources at NYS, there's no consequence. From the time the information came out about 2 years ago, nobody is serving time. Despite somebody like Kavura, despite Mangiti, despite Anne Waiguru going before a parliamentary team and admitting that she actually played with the public resources, there's no consequence. The same thing is happening with the police force today. The GSU know that we can engage in all manner of mischief, but there's going to be no consequence. So if there's no consequence for your mischief, then there's no incentive for you to stop. Because you see, the only way a society can mature is when you enjoy the benefits of your decision and also suffer consequences as a benefit of your decision.
Correct.
But now, the policemen are doing all these allegations coming up in Mombasa, but there's no consequence. And you recall, when a president is sworn into office, his principal responsibility is not even to come up with SGR or all these kind of projects, is to protect lives and properties of the citizens. That's why he's given the Bible, that's why he's given the ceremonial sword, to protect lives and properties. Now, if you go to Mumias today, there are so many people who've lost their lives. There are families that are mourning. There are so many breadwinners who have died today. You can imagine the gentleman who died has got a family, has got obligation. He was paying fees somewhere. So what happens to those kids? Those kids are just going to lead a very funny lifestyle. Now, somebody maybe has gone to Wealth of Fund, has taken a loan, has started up a business, is trying to earn an honest living because he has no benefits of going to steal from NYS or from Afia House. He's running a small kiosk across the road in Mumias. Then these policemen, when they're looking for guns, they come and set up your business on fire. And maybe you've got a cash box, you've kept some money there, you've just bought stock. And you know, a typical scenario, somebody with a small shop, a shopkeeper, maybe had just gone to a bank that day in the morning and gotten maybe 300,000, bought stock, and the entire stock is up in flames. And you see, General Kaiseri, instead of addressing that issue, is telling us that he doesn't want this MP to go to his office. So you begin to wonder, is there really leadership in Kenya? And where does the buck stop? Of course, the buck stops with the president.
Correct.
Because we've got a contract with the president. For us, as far as we are concerned, we actually do not even know Major General Kaiseri. We do not know the Inspector General of Police. The person where the buck stops is the president. And at this stage, you must offer that leadership. Really, it's bad manners that you have. I mean, you know, you cannot be graphic enough. That a lady has just come from hospital with a surgical wound, and a policeman is saying, open your private parts. I want to establish whether or not you've got a gun.
Okay, discuss. Let me stop you there. Unfortunately, we have breaking news. The communist ex-president, Cuban leader Fidel Castro has died at the age of 90. The communist ex-president had been in poor health for many years, reportedly blighted by intestinal problems. But the cause of his death has not yet been revealed. He was president of the Caribbean island for more than 30 years. His brother Raul became president in 2008 after a string of illnesses saw the historic figure withdraw from the public eye. The revolutionary politician, who was allied with Marxist figurehead Che Guevara, was seen in April bidding farewell to the Cuban Communist Party. So news just in there. Fidel Castro, the former Cuban leader, is dead at the age of 90 years. He was reported to have been in poor health for many years, reportedly blighted by intestinal problems, but the cause of his death has not yet been revealed. There are pictures of Fidel Castro. We'll be able to bring you more information on his death, of course, in our subsequent bulletins. All right, and here in studio we have Dismas Mukua and Ndego Njiru. So, of course, before we continue, let's speak a little bit about Fidel Castro. Just, very unfortunate, but at the age of 90 years, he has left quite an interesting legacy for the people of Cuba. I don't know if any of you have anything to say about it.
Of course.
Of course.
All right, let's begin with you, Ndego.
I first of all wish to give my condolences to Fidel and his family, and also say that Fidel has been my hero. I repeatedly watch the Cuban Revolution movies every now and then. And for the reason why I was actually even about to comment about it even before we got this breaking news, that a revolution is prepared by government. The government is the one that puts fertilizer on a revolution. It's the one that prepares the seedbed of revolution. It's the one that sows the seeds of a revolution. Why there was a revolution in Cuba in 1959 is because of the dictatorship of Batista when he was the president. And Fidel, being a very young man and realizing how oppressive the system was, that Batista had put fertilizer, prepared the seedbed and laid down the seeds and watered the seeds of revolution. They had to do what they did. And comparing what happened there in Kenya, and I'm not saying that we are going to lead one.
Right.
It's comparative studies. Kenya is preparing itself for a revolution. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, it may not even be during our lifetimes.
Right.
But the way government is dealing with its citizenry is creating and sowing those seeds. How do I bring it up? I bring it up in the sense that that child whose father was killed by the police in Mumias in search of a gun is going to live harboring a lot of bitterness about government. That it is government that killed my mother, it's government that killed my father. I am the way I am because of the results of government. So all this dissatisfaction, when they reach an optimum level and people are not able to condone it anymore, they are going to vent out. The other example, considering also comparing Fidel with the French Revolution, the French Revolution was sparked by something very minute and something people could never think about. Right. The bread. When the people went to the palace and they told King Louis, they wanted to be addressed by King Louis, to tell them to check on the extravagancy of Marie Antoinette, the queen, and also to check on the rising prices of the food bread. When Marie Antoinette, the queen heard that people were coming to demonstrate at the palace, and she sought to know the reason of the demonstration, and she was told they are demonstrating because they do not have bread. She told them, oh guys, if you don't have bread, you can go and eat cakes.
Right.
You see, the government is one that is fertilizing.
Showing how out of touch they are with
They were out of touch. That is what brought Fidel where he is. And African nations are preparing themselves to such kind of revolutions when they become insensitive to the public outcries.
Right, right. Dismiss. Talk to us about Fidel Castro.
Fidel Castro is celebrated for many things. And I'm just going to establish 3 things where Kenya can actually borrow a leaf from. When you look at healthcare in Cuba, it's the best all over the world.
Right.
The cost of treating a normal patient in Cuba is much lower compared to the US, compared to Norway, compared to any other country in the world. Actually, there are delegations upon delegations which go to Cuba to try to establish how do they do their healthcare. And for them, they've done it using several things. Number one, that when you become a medical doctor, it's not an opportunity for you to go and make money.
Right.
It's not a factor of production in Cuba. If you are a medical doctor, and you are, say, treating, your clinic is in Kibera, you do not go stay in Lavington or Karen and go back to Kibera to go and treat your patients. You have to live and work where your patients are. And I saw recently, when he was the Minister for Healthcare, Mr. James Macharia, saying that they would organize trips to Cuba to go and study how the healthcare works.
Right.
And I think that's something that we need to borrow. And when you look at the bilateral interventions countrywide, in any country where they've gone to assist them set up medical facilities,
right,
they've done very well. Like, for instance, in Africa, they've gone to Angola and set up their healthcare, which works. And that's something that maybe we need to embrace. And then number 2, there is no corruption in Cuba. And if the government of Fidel Castro, or now his brother, Raul Castro, suspect that we are engaged in corruption, you are, I mean, the kind of sentence which comes your way is so heavy that you can never, ever dare imagine.
Right.
And I think as our leadership, we need to understand that when you're a leader, you are supposed to work for Wanjiku. And in as much during the time of revolution and the time when there were so many embargoes and sanctions against the people of Cuba, the people suffered. But at the end of the day, they're very happy. The probability of you today dying because of a medical condition in Cuba today is 0.
Right.
It will never, never happen. You get very good medical care. And even when it comes to medical research and vaccination, Cuba leads the world. And one wonders if other countries with a fairly small economy like Cuba, that has undergone a lot of sanctions, that has undergone a lot of embargoes, is able to deliver this progress, where can't a nation like Kenya be able to achieve that?
Right.
And then number two, of course, as Barack Obama leaves office, he is celebrated highly as the U.S. president who has decided to come up with an embassy. A few months ago, America opened up an embassy in Cuba. And one hopes that Trump, as he takes office, is not going to negate that embassy opening and say that it gets closed.
Right.
But really, for me, the most important thing that we need to do is to go to Cuba and study how the healthcare works.
All right, so very interesting thoughts you all have on Fidel Castro. What do you think, Dago, that our Kenyan leaders can learn from this leader?
Our Kenyan leaders must have the love of the nation. They must have the desire to work for the nation and the appetite to work for the nation more than the desire to create wealth. It's something very interesting about, and I may not comment about it at length, is how Fidel was able to revolutionize the thinking of government to making sure that government is responding to the people's needs and demands.
Right.
And that's the most important thing that Kenyans leaders must learn. Self-sacrifice. They must learn the art of servanthood as opposed to the art of being bossy.
Right.
They must learn the art of interacting with mwananchi. If you saw how Fidel Castro handled the Cuban missile crisis,
Right.
and of course, when you try to internalize the reason why he wanted to have a missile base in Cuba, was not because he wanted to conquer the whole world. He wanted to have the Russians establish their missile base there because he wanted to protect the lives of the Cubans. So we can see at what length a leader is going to. Even during the Cold War, collaborating with Russia, Russia has a very bad taste with the Americans, and even inviting them to establish a military base there and missile base to protect his people. But what today we are seeing the Kenyan leaders going to kill citizens in search of a gun that is supposed to be used to protect life. So comparatively, we have a lot to learn from the Cuban leader. And may the Lord rest his soul in peace. And when you get to heaven, I hope to see him and give me some tips. So Kenyans and Kenyans leader must learn that art of servanthood.
Right. Okay. Unfortunately, our time is up. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for this in-depth newspaper review and, of course, your comments on Fidel Castro, High Court advocate Ndegwa Njiru, and political analyst Dismas Mokua joining us in a studio this morning, which brings us to a close here on the Weekend Express. But, of course, we leave you with breaking news. A former Cuban leader, Fidel Castro, has died at the age of 90. The communist ex-president had been in poor health for many years, reportedly blighted by intestinal problems. But the cause of his death has yet to be revealed. He was the president of the Caribbean island for more than 30 years. His brother Raul became president in 2008 after a string of illnesses saw the historic figure withdraw from the public eye. The revolutionary politician, who was allied with Marxist figurehead Che Guevara, was seen in April bidding farewell to the Cuban Communist Party. All right, well, that brings us to a close here. Thank you so much for watching The Weekend Express. My name is Michele Ngele. Do catch me at the top of the hour for more.